Hey guys, alright. Welcome everyone. The story begins in ancient Egypt, with an evil entity named Imlare spreading chaos throughout the valley. The priests unite against the threat and find a solution in Ra's amulet, using the powerful object to imprison the nefarious magic. After that, the amulet is buried to prevent anyone from accidentally releasing Imlare. In the present day, John Travis is waiting in the desert until his grandson Mark appears to pick him up. The young man is very patient and helpful with his grandfather's hobbies, even after 2 years of digging in the sand for ancient relics. Mark is also a war veteran, but when John tries to talk about Iraq, he just says he doesn't like that subject. Meanwhile, archaeologist Jesse Carter is relaxing with one of his students. To his misfortune, the news playing on the TV is about a project led by Dr. Alice Carter. She is about to begin excavating the site with a classic The Ten Commandments was filmed by Cecil B. DeMille. Jesse's photo also appears in the report, mentioning him as Alice's husband. His student becomes furious to find out he is married, especially discovering it this way. He tries to explain the situation and swears he is almost separated, but the girl doesn't want to listen and says she will quit his class the next day. In the town of Guadalupe, California, Alice's team is beginning the excavation. A girl named Jamie is so focused that her colleagues even try to play a prank on her, but they end up being impressed by her unwavering focus. Her colleague is named Tommy, and Alice's assistant is Megan. It is then that John and Mark also arrive, determined to participate in the project. Alice says she cannot grant access to 2 novices, but John says her team has not yet found the best treasures, like the throne room or the Pharaoh's Gate. The archaeologist is surprised that he knows all this, to which he simply replies that he grew up around there. Trying to help, Mark states that his grandfather is one of the few people who was present during the filming. He says they just want permission to dig around there and promise not to damage anything valuable or break any relics. Worn out, Alice asks Mark to show her where he intends to start, and John barely hides his excitement. At the end of the day, Mark can no longer handle the heavy work, but his grandfather asks for 10 more minutes, as he feels there is a great find very close. Not hiding his sarcasm, Mark reminds him that he said the same thing before unearthing a worthless license plate. John controls himself from cursing his grandson and continues to scour every inch of sand. As soon as the detector indicates the presence of some metal, he tells Mark to come quickly because the hole won't dig itself. With infinite patience, the young man starts to remove the sand until the shovel hits something. John gets emotional when he lifts a small decorated box and confirms that he has been looking for it all along, as he buried it himself when he was just a child. He then opens the lid and takes out an object, handing it to his grandson. We see that it is none other than Ra's amulet. Mark still doesn't know what is in his hands, but he is surprised anyway, as he was already suspicious of the existence of that box. At that moment, a crack opens in the sand for no apparent reason, and John loses his balance, falling headfirst into the hole. Mark runs to catch him, but he is left hanging from the ceiling of a secret chamber, where there is what appears to be a statue of an Egyptian god with the head of a dog, Anubis. However, one of the dog's ears suddenly starts to move, and soon after, the creature frees itself completely. Seeing that pile of ashes in the shape of a statue taking heavy steps towards him, John starts to scream and begs Mark to get him out of there quickly. However, the creature not only manages to reach him before that but has already seen the glimmering amulet. Grabbing John's arm, it tears it off as if it were made of sand. Only now does Mark manage to pull his grandfather out of the hole and is shocked to see him without an arm. He begins to scream and call for help, while John babbles that the legends are true. Mark tells someone to call an ambulance and starts CPR, but his grandfather cannot hold on. Later, the police say that the chamber was part of the old film set. The only explanation for what happened to John's arm is that he must have hurt himself on the splintery boards. Mark doesn't fully believe this version, and the sheriff admits that there simply isn't a better one. In any case, it must have been an accident, which means Alice is responsible. Since the governor of California is also a movie star, the officer says she will get away with it this time, but only if she promises to keep the curious novices at bay. Mark begins to pack his belongings, and Alice hands him the blessed box he has just inherited. The young man still doesn't understand grandfather's obsession with the old movie sets, referred to by fans as the Lost City. Seeing the amulet, Alice says it seems to be a type of protection against evil spirits, And Mark responds with a sad tone, but it must not be working well. However, he says that none of this was her fault and knows very well that his grandfather wouldn't have given up even if she had forbidden him. The two begin to discuss the excavation, and she says she is racing against time, as the oil refinery construction will transform the entire area in 2 weeks. When Mark mentions having been a logistics coordinator in Iraq, she decides to hire him for a similar position. He accepts, saying he will take the opportunity to investigate what really happened to his grandfather. The two seem to be getting along quite well, but then Jesse arrives to ruin the mood. Mark notices the tension in the air and says he was already leaving. As soon as he is alone with his ex-wife, Jesse starts talking about rekindling their romance and says he can't erase 4 years of marriage so quickly. Alice responds sarcastically and accuses Jesse of only coming to snoop on her work. She also says he never wanted an equal partner and always viewed her as a mere assistant. Still looking for an opening, Jesse says he can at least help her with this project since he knows a lot about the 10 Commandments. But according to Alice, what he really knows is how to covet someone else's woman. Despite this, she ultimately gives in and lets him join the team. Days later, Tommy comes to inform her that something incredible has been found. It is a huge part of the film set, which was buried exactly where John said it would be. Alice admits she was searching in the wrong place but is happy with the discovery nonetheless. Even more impressive is a jar that Tommy also found, as it doesn't seem to have been created for the film. It is known that the director put a lot of effort into the production, and there are rumors about authentic relics from ancient Egypt. Alice prefers not to get her hopes up, but Tommy's colleagues are already saying they envy the discovery. At the same time, the tractor driver begins to feel something strange in his legs and looks down. Dozens of scorpions are crawling up his body. Very anxious, he starts trying to swat the creatures away and accidentally hits the tractor's gearshift. The vehicle begins to move aimlessly, and it takes a while for the others to notice what is about to happen. Tommy is right in the path of the runaway tractor and does not hear when his colleagues begin yelling, trying to warn him. It is too late when the driver decides to jump from the cab, now completely covered in scorpions. Alice and her students cover their eyes to avoid seeing Tommy's horrible end. Jesse knocks down the driver, not knowing it wasn't his fault, and the scorpions silently dive into the sand, as if they had never been there. Alice does not want to interrupt the work, afraid there won't be time to finish, but she lacks the courage to contradict the sheriff, who is growing more suspicious of this crowd. As soon as he leaves, Mark confesses his suspicions that there is something supernatural involved in these deaths. Jesse doesn't believe in curses and thinks it's all just coincidence. At night, Megan talks to Jamie and confesses she feels bad for staying around after these tragedies. Still very focused, Jamie comforts her friend but says they need to continue working precisely so they can finish soon. Alone again, she turns on the recorder and begins to catalog one of the found items. She looks back when she hears a noise but soon returns to concentrating on her research, not noticing that something is rising within the tent, right beside her. It is the same entity that attacked John in the chamber, and Janie can barely scream when she comes face to face with it. Choked by the neck, she begins to struggle in panic but cannot break free. Outside, no one in the team notices the attack, and Jamie's body ends up being covered by the sand. The next day, Alice finds it strange that she is absent as the move is already beginning, but she does not suspect that anything serious has occurred. The rivalry between Jesse and Mark becomes more tense as one tries to prove more capable than the other. Both want to impress Alice but only succeed in irritating her. Entering one of the old film sets, the three stop fighting to admire the richness of details. Mark speaks of his grandfather, explaining that John was one of the producers and traveled a lot searching for artifacts. Then Alice notices a shadow moving and sees an animal-like creature stealthily passing by them. Before she can scream, the thing knocks the other two down with a headbutt and grabs her neck. However, she is wearing the amulet as a necklace and the light hits the pyramid pendant. The entity is hit by the reflection and releases Alice to the ground before dissolving. Mark catches a glimpse of the creature for a moment, but Jesse takes so long to get up that he misses the entire incident. Then someone outside begins to call for help, and Mark goes to check what is happening. The entire team is retreating, leaving only Megan and her friend Heather behind. The two tell that a creature with a dog head came out of a cloud of sand, grabbed Megan's arm, and then vanished. Furthermore, There is now a kind of symbol engraved on her skin. Returning to the set, Alice realizes that the inscriptions on the walls are backward, which is why they seemed nonsensical. Jesse deciphers the code and says that room is the prison of something evil. Only now does Mark decide to mention the tragedies that occurred during filming. According to his grandfather, several bizarre accidents traumatized the cast. Jesse finally gives in to the occult and says they need to hurry with the move. Megan and Heather visit the new location with the driver, Alvarez. Megan is still scared, and Heather only makes things worse when she says that Jamie likely was also attacked. Even Alvarez agrees that this project should have been canceled long ago. Meanwhile, Jesse tells Alice what he discovered about Imlare and says they may have unleashed a terrible plague. That night, these fears are confirmed when a patrolling officer is attacked by a sand monster. The new location is in Santa Maria, and Alvarez has finished transporting everything there when something happens to Megan. The mark on her arm breaks through the bandages and she begins reciting a spell while walking towards the trailers. Uncertain, Jesse decides to follow her and witnesses an explosion in the ground, from which an immense sand serpent emerges. Even summoned by Megan, the first thing the monster does is devour her in one go. The next victim is poor Alvarez, who crashes his car trying to avoid a shadow crossing the road. Staggering to a tree, he is suddenly pulled up and we see a torrent of red fall that quickly turns to sand. Meanwhile, Alice and Mark arrive at the old studio to consult the director's files. They find letters from DeMille to someone named Lionel, talking about dangers that should be buried as soon as possible. Additionally, there is evidence that many elements of the set were genuinely bought in Egypt. Then, Mark is suddenly attacked, but not by a supernatural entity. This time, it is just an old man named Nigel, who takes care of the offices. While Mark recovers, Alice explains the situation, and Nigel reveals that he was very close to John. In fact, he also was in Egypt right before the shoot. In Santa Maria, Heather is confused when she sees Jesse rushing the workers to build a wall and he explains that he needs to translate it before it's too late. He also finds something painted on a panel and recognizes the Masonic symbol. In the studio, Nigel tells Alice and Mark about the filming of the classic and the difficulties faced by the director. We see that one of the producers stole the amulet a day before finishing the shoot, and because of this, he suffered a terrible encounter with Imlare. Both the thief and the amulet ended up disappearing beneath the sand. Asking for discretion, Nigel reveals the existence of a buried city by the Nile, from where many pieces of the set came. In this city, there is an inverted pyramid that, according to rumors, would be the entrance to the underworld. He explains that the throne room was commissioned by DeMille to his Masonic companions, with the aim of guarding dangerous objects. Back in present time, we see that Imlare is getting creative in his approach. He appears to a worker as a beautiful young woman, but Jesse sees his true form when the young man is attacked. The entity then comes close to him, and Jesse tries to communicate as best he can. Indifferent to all this, Alice and Mark are enjoying a break at a hotel and talking about the old photos of the box. In a flashback, we see young John accompanying his father at work. While burying a box of keepsakes, the boy finds the amulet and decides to keep it too. This was on the last day of shooting, and John watched the destruction of the magnificent city without understanding why the director did so. At that moment, Jesse appears in the hotel with burns on his neck, demanding the amulet. He made a deal with Imlare, who will let him live if he destroys the object. Perceiving their hesitation, he grabs Alice and threatens her with a knife. Mark hears a horrible noise outside and Jesse warns that Imlare is coming. Then Alice bites his hand, and Mark throws all the paperwork on him. She escapes with Mark just as a swarm of locusts invades the hotel. Jesse also manages to escape in time, and the plague ends up falling on the chambermaid. Realizing that the danger is escalating, Mark decides to take drastic measures and takes Alice to meet his friend Buford. He is practically a gun enthusiast and doesn't mind lending some from his vast collection. When Mark asks a type of incendiary grenade called Willie Pete, as well as a rocket launcher, Buford doesn't blink before pointing to the right box. Mark and Alice leave his bunker much better equipped than they arrived but discover that Jesse has sabotaged the car. Fortunately, Buford has plenty of vehicles to offer. Hearing a noise, Mark cocks his weapon and prepares to face Jesse. Alice asks him to take it easy, as she believes her ex is possessed. Not really believing this, Mark goes to investigate and sees that the noise was only the door banging. However, Jesse is already holding Alice hostage again when he turns around. His face is covered in sores, and he keeps demanding that they hand over the amulet. To everyone's surprise, Buford demonstrates that he does know how to use his impressive weapons. He disarms Jesse from behind and takes away his weapon, while Alice rushes to Mark's side. However, the invader announces that he is not alone, and Mark sees several snakes approaching. Terrified, Buford begins shooting like crazy, and Mark must intervene before someone catches a stray bullet. Jesse takes advantage of the chaos to kidnap Alice and escapes in the car with all the weapons Mark had chosen. Buford is startled when he sees the ground cracking, and then the giant snake makes another appearance. Irritated by the disruptive visitors, Buford's wife comes out with a rifle and nearly dies of fright upon seeing it. Mark defeats the beast by shaking the amulet in front of it and then runs to the other vehicle, hurried to save Alice. He floors the accelerator and soon spots the enemy. Neither of them knows that the sheriff has set up a roadblock to catch whoever attacked his colleague the night before. The chase continues at high speed and Alice does her best to sabotage her driver, but he won't let her. Mark is the first to hear the sirens, and the sheriff interprets his reaction as resistance to arrest. Moreover, Jesse decides to try out some of Buford's toys and opens fire on him. Even having to dodge so many threats, Mark manages to shake off the police cars with a risky maneuver that causes one to crash into the other. Now resolved, he takes off after Jesse, who is already entering the dune area. When the vehicles align, he jumps into the enemy's car, which can hardly believe the audacity and also cannot aim at the intruder. Alice is forced to take the wheel when Mark pulls Jesse out, and they begin exchanging punches. Mark finally manages to knock him down and takes control, but then the dunes begin to move and a mountain of sand rises above them. Mark quickly turns around, but Jesse cannot escape the wrath of his new master. Arriving in Santa Maria, the two survivors nearly run over Nigel, who has come to witness the final confrontation. However, when he asks about the amulet, Mark realizes he dropped the necklace on the ground. Before he can grab it, a huge samhan forms and grabs the amulet. Imlare materializes right in front of them, and they start quickly retreating. Thinking of a plan B unintentionally, they discover that the thing cannot enter the place where they are due to the painted inscriptions. Mark is almost celebrating when Nigel shows that Imlare has various resources. Without needing to enter, he controls the engravings on the walls to attack them. While Mark fights off the drawings, Alice goes to the car and grabs the box with the Willy Pete's. Seeing that Imlare is getting close to her, Nigel grabs a metal rod and begins striking the entity. Mark sees the danger, but there's no time to save his friend, who is thrown into the air. Furious, he attacks Imlare with a sledgehammer and ends up being hurled as well. The same happens to Alice, who lands far away. With one of Buford's weapons, Mark blows off the canine head, but it regenerates in an instant. Frustrated, Mark begins to draw the thing closer, allowing himself to be attacked. Then he grabs the amulet and tosses it into the box of the Willy Pete's, using the rocket launcher afterward. This causes a massive explosion, and Imlare begins to melt. He transforms into a gelatinous substance that almost reaches them, but then freezes, as if it were a glass sculpture, and Mark shatters the work with the sledgehammer. A series of cars begin to arrive, and Nigel warns that they are his Masonic friends. They came to help construct a vault a little stronger. That it's better than a darming out, and it can see it's this when it's